The focus of this video is on the modeling of the environment. Now, this is a very important step in the system level design methodology because it is crucial to model the environment in which the system is to operate in order to properly ascertain how well the system is working. And the modeling of the environment has its analog in RTL design when you're talking about test bench generation, transaction-based verification, scenario-based verification, things like that. Now, in what follows, we're going to talk about several modes of traffic generation. This is an illustrative list, but not an exhaustive list. Consider traffic generation mode number 1, which we label statistical generation. Here we will define a probability distribution and the parameters for that probability distribution in the transaction source. Distributions such as the exponential distribution, the normal distribution, the uniform distribution, and others. And then for the transaction itself, we'll specify values for the fields. For example, it could be the source, destination, data, priority, or bus delay. And the concatenation of the transaction source and the processing block will constitute the transaction source that has an inner arrival time according to the probability distribution. This is traffic mode generation number 1. The second mode is application specific, where you develop a partial or full system that may connect to the design that you're developing. And that is what is going to exercise your design. And so the advantage of this mode is that you know exactly what is going to drive your system, and you need it to be precise to that application. And the combination of the application, which is in your environment, and the system will allow you to more accurately ascertain whether your system is performing well. Next, let us consider traffic generation mode 3. Here we're using a trace file in which we are going to read from that trace file and output transactions according to the times listed in the trace file as well as its content. This is very effective when we have actual data measured from a network or measured from hardware, and we want to use that data to exercise our system. And within Visual Sim Architect, what we would do is we would have a block that we call a traffic reader read from a file. And once again, the effect of this is to, for each entry in the trace file, output a transaction at the time stamp in the trace file as well as the content of the trace file. In traffic generation mode number 4, we are using a clock-based traffic. Now, as a caveat here, almost all of what you're going to do in system level design is going to be based upon high-level transactions and transactions that are sent typically asynchronously. But there are some designs that require a far greater level of detail and lower level of abstraction. And these designs could be clocked, in which case we'll use this mode in order to drive those blocks. And so we have a clock block within Visual Sim Architect that will send a rising pos edge of the clock followed by a falling neg edge of the clock. And this would constitute the clock-based traffic. The final traffic generation mode that we're going to talk in this presentation is on the queue-based traffic. So the idea here is that you're going to be using a queue to drive the rest of the system. And the queue content and the transactions contained there are unpredictable in terms of the ordering and in terms of other dynamic queue operations. And this makes for a great stochastic traffic generator. So in this case, you're going to have transactions that come from perhaps different sources of the environment into the actual queue, and the departure from the queue will depend upon events that can be targeted from either the environment or within the system itself. And the transactions that depart will then be used to drive the rest of your system. And that produces a very easy way of defining a rather complex environment for your system. So here at the close of the video, let me just reiterate that the modes of traffic generation in this presentation was meant to be illustrative, but is by no means exhaustive. There are many more ways of developing models of the environment within Visual Sim Architect. This ends our video on the modeling of the environment.